Welcome to Long Stories for Sleep. Just set me playing, relax, and drift off. Maybe you'll dream about the story I'm telling you. Subscribe and you'll have a library of stories to choose from. Comment to let me know where in the world you are and what stories you would like added. That's really helpful information. Enough rambling. On with the story. I know you'll love it even if you don't reach the end.
Chapter 1. A city divided. The city of Verona rose with the sun, her stone walls bathed in gold and shadow, her towers still wearing the hush of dawn. But beneath the surface of her beauty there thrummed a tension old as memory. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a spark to rouse the fire long simmering between the Montagues and the Capulets. Though none could say how the feud began, all knew its cost: pride bruised, blood spilled, and peace perpetually out of reach. The Capulets' household stirred early that morning, the courtyard, shaded by fig trees and guarded by silent statues, rang with the clamour of servants preparing for the day. Among them 2 swaggering men-at-arms, Gregory and Samson, lounged by the gate, with hands on their swords and mischief on their minds. Their chatter was low but sharp-edged. "Draw, if you be men," muttered Samson, eyeing a pair of Montague servants approaching down the dusty street. "Let them start," said Gregory, fingering the hilt of his blade. "We'll not be blamed if we but respond." A look, a shrug, a thumb bitten in mockery small gestures, were tinder enough. In an instant tempers flared and steel was drawn. The clash echoed down the lane, drawing cries and the rush of feet. By chance or fate, Benvolio, to the Montagues, happened upon the scene. "Part, fools! Put up your swords, you know not what you do." Benvolio waded into the fray, his sword raised not in fury, but to defend peace. Yet his effort was swiftly undone. Tybalt, nephew to Lady Capulet and fire incarnate, arrived in a storm of disdain. "What art thou drawn among these heartless hinds? Turn thee, Benvolio, look upon thy death." "I do but keep the peace," Benvolio answered, wary but resolute. "Put up thy sword, or manage it to part these men with me." Tybalt scoffed. "What, drawn, and talk of peace? I hate the word as I hate hell. All Montagues and thee." Steel rang against steel. The scuffle grew, drawing more men, more shouts, until the square seethed with the chaos of a street brawl. Dust rose, dogs barked, and windows opened as frightened faces peeked out. Then came the prince. Aeschylus, ruler of Verona, rode into the square surrounded by guards, his voice slicing through the din like thunder. "Rebellious subjects, enemies to peace, on pain of torture from those bloody hands, throw your mistempered weapons to the ground." Slowly the fight unravelled. Swords dropped. Men stepped back, breathing hard. The prince's gaze burned through the crowd. His patience long spent. 3 civil brawls, bred of an airy word by the old Capulet and Montague, have thrice disturbed the quiet of our streets. If ever you disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. Both lords, summoned separately by the prince, left under grim warning the Capulets to their house, brooding and unrepentant. The Montagues with furrowed brows and quiet concern, for someone was missing. Romeo.Benvolio, eager to mend more than quarrels, went in search of his cousin. He found him alone beneath a sycamore, where shadow met sun. Romeo looked the part of a melancholic youth's shoulders, slumped, eyes distant, the very picture of unspoken sorrow. "Good morrow, cousin," said Benvolio gently. Romeo turned, managing. A weak smile, is the day so young, but new struck 9. What sadness lengthens Romeo's hours? Romeo sighed, not having that which, having, makes them short in love. Out of love, out of her favour, where I am in love. Benvolio listened patiently as Romeo poured forth his heart. The name Rosaline surfaced often, spoken with reverence and pain. She had beauty, yes, but no warmth for him. She had vowed chastity, and with each refusal she became more alluring in Romeo's eyes and more distant in truth. "Be ruled by me," said Benvolio at last. "Forget to think of her." "Oh, teach me how I should forget to think." "By giving liberty unto thine eyes. Examine other beauties." Romeo shook his head, unconvinced, yet not unmoved. Benvolio's words fell like seeds uncertain where they might take root, but not without hope. Meanwhile, at the Capulet household, plans were under way for a grand feast. Old Capulet, though wary of his daughter's youth, considered her marriage. Count Paris, noble and well-favoured, had come to seek Juliet's hand. Yet Capulet hesitated. "My child is yet a stranger in the world," he told Paris. "Let 2 more summers wither in their pride, ere we may think her ripe to be a bride." But to please the suzerain, perhaps to see Juliet observed among peers, Capulet invited him to the feast that evening. He gave a servant a list of guests, and sent him forth to spread the word. The servant, unable to read, soon encountered Romeo and Benvolio in the street. Fortune, ever weaving strange designs, saw to it that Romeo read the invitation aloud. "A fair assembly," he murmured. Whither should they come? To supper at Capulet's house. Benvolio, eyes gleaming with opportunity, said quickly, "At this same ancient feast of Capulets sups the fair Rosaline, whom thou so lovest. Compare her face with some that I shall show, and I will make thee think thy swan a crow." Romeo frowned, but his curiosity was piqued. If nothing else, he might see Rosaline again, so the path was set. That night, masked and unbidden, Romeo Montague would enter the house of his family's sworn enemies. There, beneath lanterns and music, fate would move its unseen hand. Verona slept, unaware that love and tragedy had already begun to entwine, and Juliet, she was still unaware of the name Romeo. Her day, like many others, had been filled with small routines, gentle laughter, and her nurse's fond gossip. But that night everything would change, for in a city divided by ancient hatred, the first sparks of forbidden love were already dancing in the dark. Chapter 2. A masked encounter and a heart aflame. The bells of Verona tolled a mellow hour, and the air was filled with a hush of anticipation as twilight settled over the ancient city. 1,000 shadows stretched across narrow streets, where flickering lanterns were lit one by one, as if the stars themselves were descending to take their place among the rooftops. In the great house of the Capulets, preparations were reaching their crescendo. Servants scurried in crisp rhythm. Tables were set with glinting silver, candles placed in tall holders of brass, and the scent of roasted meats and fresh herbs drifted like a spell through every corridor. Lady Capulet oversaw the proceedings with quiet confidence, her expression composed, her tone decisive. Capulet himself stood near the entrance hall, clasping hands with guests as they began to arrive. His voice, aged by time, yet hearty with cheer, welcomed nobles and merchants alike, all drawn to his celebration. The night promised merriment, wine and dance, and somewhere within its folds, fate, sly and silent, waited to unfurl its design. In another quarter of the city, Romeo wandered with Mercutio and Benvolio, cloaked and masked. He bore no joy, only restlessness, love's sting. Yet lingered Rose Lynn, cold and distant, had offered him nothing but silence. Yet Mercutio, ever irreverent and magnetic, would not suffer Romeo's melancholy for long. "You are a lover," he proclaimed, twirling his mask in hand, borrowed Cupid's wings, and soar with them above a common bound. Romeo sighed. "I am too sore and pierced with his shaft, too sore with his light feathers." But Mercutio only laughed, and with a flourish began to speak of Queen Mabtha, fairy midwife of dreams, who gallops through sleeping minds in a chariot fashioned of spider legs and dewdrops. The speech, wild and fantastical, drew a reluctant smile from Romeo, though his spirit remained tangled. Their small band approached the Capulet house, joining the stream of guests, slipping past the threshold. Within, a symphony of music, laughter, and the rustling of fine fabrics welcomed them. Masked, they moved unnoticed through the crowd. Juliet, meanwhile, had prepared herself with quiet grace. Her nurse fluttered about her, fussing and smoothing. "You're called for, my young lady. The guests are come, supper served up, and every person in place. You are looked for and sought for, asked for and prayed for." Juliet, still untouched by any strong affection, moved into the hall like a candle among lesser flames. Her beauty, though unassuming to her own eyes, struck many with awe. Paris, the nobleman favoured by her parents, stood nearby, watching her with intention, but Juliet's eyes, though courteous, were not searching. The masked trio had entered, and even as Romeo vowed to keep his heart chained to sorrow, he saw her. From across the hall, across 100 colours and clattering footsteps, he saw Juliet, and time, that great and ruthless force, paused. He moved as though led by music that none other could hear. She turned, sensing him, their eyes met, and something ancient stirred. Romeo stepped forward, heart trembling beneath velvet and lace. With reverence he took her hand. "If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine," he murmured, "the gentle fine is this: my lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." Juliet, surprised, but not displeased, answered with wit and grace, "Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss." A soft laughter lingered between them. Her words were careful, but her voice betrayed something new, something stirred, sudden and delicate. Romeo pressed further. "Have not saints lips, and holy palmers too?" "Ay," Juliet said, a slow smile blooming lips that they must use in prayer. "Then let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair." She let him kiss her, brief and trembling, like a prayer offered in the hush of a chapel. The moment lingered in the hush that followed, a beat suspended between their breaths. But even in such enchantment, the world would not pause forever. Tybalt, sharp-eyed and hot-blooded, had seen the interloper. He knew Romeo's voice, despite the mask. Fury twisted within him, a fire-seeking kindling. He strode to capulate. "Uncle, this is a Montague, our foe a villain that is hither come. In spite to scorn our solemnity this night." Capulet, still flushed with hospitality and age's tempered pride, waved him off. "He shall be endured. Verona brags of him to be a virtuous and well-governed youth. I would not for the wealth of all this town here in my house do him disparagement." But Tybalt burned. He turned away, teeth clenched, swearing silently that the insult would not be left unpunished. Juliet, unaware, had turned back to her nurse. The woman, her face solemn, whispered something, and Juliet's world tilted. "His name is Romeo," the nurse said, "and a Montague, the only son of your great enemy." Juliet stood silent. Then her voice, barely a breath, said, "My only love sprung from my only hate, too early seen unknown, and known too late." Across the room, Romeo learned the same. "Is she a Capulet?" he asked. "I answered Benvolio, watching him closely. The daughter of Capulet, the very same." Romeo turned, his joy now stitched with sorrow. "My life is my foe's debt," he said. The night wore on, laughter and music washing away. The evening, but two hearts now beat to a new rhythm, one touched by beauty and cursed by blood. Beneath silks and stars, love had taken root in dangerous soil. Outside, the moon rose high, indifferent and pale. It saw what none inside did. Trembling threads of destiny, taut and ready to pull. And from that moment forward, Verona would never be the same. Chapter 3. Secrets and oaths. With the revels ended, and the music faded, night settled like a hush over Verona. Romeo, unable to stay away, slipped past Capulet's orchard walls, scaling them with the recklessness only love bestows. He moved like a shadow beneath the moonlight, driven not by mischief, but by a yearning he could not still. He found her there, Juliet, standing on her balcony, the soft breeze toying with her hair. She thought herself alone, and poured out her heart into the night. "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" she sighed. "Deny thy father, and refuse thy name." Romeo, caught in the wonder of her words, answered, "Call me but Love, and I'll be new baptized." She startled, but joy soon overtook fear. In whispers they confessed what had bloomed between them, barely born, yet deeper than roots that had grown for years. Juliet, wise beyond her years, worried over the swiftness of their affection. "It is too rash, too unadvised, too sudden," she said. But love does not wait for reason, and neither did they. They spoke until morning's light began to pale the stars. Before they parted, they pledged themselves. Juliet promised to send word through her nurse, and Romeo swore to arrange their marriage. At dawn, Romeo sought out Friar Lawrence, the grey-bearded priest who knew him like a second father. The friar, tending herbs in the garden, raised his brows when he heard of this new devotion. "Holy Saint Francis, what a change is here!" he exclaimed. "Is Rosaline so soon forsaken?" But Romeo's urgency persuaded him. He saw in their union the potential to mend the rift between Montague and Capulet. "In one respect I'll thy assistant be," he agreed, "for this alliance may so happy prove to turn your household's rancour to pure love." Elsewhere Mercutio and Benvolio searched for Romeo, still unaware of his secret. They mocked Tybalt's latest challenger formal letter, calling Romeo to a dual land exchanged. Jests that danced between brilliance and cruelty. The city swirled with tension, though none yet guessed how near the storm had come. By midday, Juliet waited impatiently. Her nurse, slow and full of teasing, finally brought Romeo's message. They would wed that afternoon in secret, with only Friar Lawrence as witness, so they met in the chapel, hearts pounding. Words were exchanged, vows spoken, and hands clasped. Thus, beneath the vaulted quiet of sacred stone, Romeo and Juliet were joined not by family or festivity, but by a love that defied names and fates. They walked back into Verona as husband and wife, their joy bright enough to outshine every shadow, if only for a fleeting hour. Chapter 4. Blood in the Square. No sooner had the vows been spoken than the tremble of fate began to shake Verona's fragile peace. Though Romeo and Juliet now bore the quiet secret of their union, the city above was bristling with heat and tension. The sun blazed in the pale sky, flattening shadows and thinning tempers. In the town square, Mercutio loitered beneath a fig tree's sparse shade, fanning himself lazily with his hat, while Benvolio paced nearby. "The day is hot, the capels are abroad," Benvolio murmured, wary. "If we meet, we shall not scape." "A brawl," Mercutio grinned. "Thou art like one of those fellows that when he enters the confines of a tavern claps his sword on the table and says, 'God send me no need of thee,' and by the second cup draws it on the drawer." Benvolio's smile faded as he saw Tybalt approaching. The Capulet cousin walked with purpose, each step sharpening the edge of his rage. Behind him came a small retinue, silent and watchful. Tybalt stopped before them and bowed stiffly. "Gentlemen," he said, without warmth, "a word with one of you." Mercutio stepped forward. "Make it a word and a blow." "I am for you," Tybalt said coldly, "if you be for me." Romeo appeared, still flushed with the memory of Juliet's lips, his heart too full to hold hate. He greeted Tybalt with a quiet dignity. "Tybalt, the reason I have to love thee doth much excuse the appertaining rage to such a greeting." Tybalt narrowed his eyes. "Thou art a villain." Mercutio could bear no more. "O calm, dishonorable, vile submission," he growled, drawing his sword. "Tybalt, you rat-catcher, will you walk?" They fought. The crowd scattered, dust rising in clouds around them. Romeo, desperate to part them, thrust himself between their blades, and then Tybalt lunged. Mercutio staggered. "I am hurt," he said, surprised. "A plague owed both your houses." Blood soaked his shirt. The jesting in his voice faded to trembling fury. "Ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find me a grave man." He died in Romeo's arms. Rage flared like fire in Romeo's heart. The world blurred to a single point. Tybalt. They fought this time not with taunts but with the bitter edge of grief. Steel clashed against steel in the furnace of the square. And then it ended. Tybalt fell. Still, blood pooled in silence. The city held its breath until the prince arrived, flanked by guards and nobles. Benvolio, voice shaking, recounted the tale. Lady Capulet, weeping, called for Romeo's death. The prince's voice was thunder made flesh. Romeo slew Tybalt, who slew Mercutio, who now the price shall pay. Yet even in his wrath he sought a middle path. Let Romeo hence in haste. Else, when he is found, that hour is his last. Bear hence this body, and attend our will. Juliet, in her chamber, waited. Her nurse entered with trembling hands and terrible news. "He's gone, he's gone, he's gone," she cried. "Tybalt is slain, and Romeo banished." Juliet reeled. "Oh, serpent heart, hid with a flowering face," she gasped. "Was ever book containing such vile matter so fairly bound?" And yet her love would not turn. "Shall I speak ill of him that is my husband?" she whispered. "My dear cousin, but my dearer lord." She sent her nurse to find Romeo, hiding now with Friar Lawrence. There the young Montague lay collapsed in despair. "Banishment," he cried. "There is no world without Verona walls." The friar lifted him. "Art thou a man?" he asked. "Thy tears are womanish." He urged Romeo to rise, to live, to hope. "Go, get thee to thy love, as was decreed. Ascend her chamber, hence, and comfort her." So under darkness Romeo slipped once more into Juliet's arms. They clung to one another as the night passed too swiftly. Words ran dry, leaving only touch. The dawn broke. "Wilt thou be gone?" Juliet asked, holding him tightly. Romeo smiled through sorrow. "I must be gone and live, or stay and die." Their farewell was 1,000 deaths. "Oh, think, saint, thou we shall ever meet again," she whispered. "I doubt it not," he replied, "and all these woes shall serve for sweet discourses in our time to come." When he was gone, her tears came unbidden. And just as grief settled like a veil, her mother arrived with tidings. "Marry, my child, early next Thursday morn. The gallant Paris shall happily make thee a joyful bride." Juliet stared, stunned. "He shall not make me there a joyful bride." Lady Capulet stiffened. Lord Capulet entered moments later, only to erupt at Juliet's refusal. "Hang thee, young baggage! Disobedient wretch!" he roared. "Get thee to church, O Thursday, or never after look me in the face." Her nurse, once so full of mirth and comfort, now advised her to wed Paris. "Romeo is banished, and Paris is a lovely gentleman." Juliet turned cold. "Speakest thou from thy heart?" "Ay," said the nurse. "Then I'll to the friar to know his remedy. If all else fail, myself have power to die." And so the chapter closed not in harmony, but in growing dread, as love bent under the weight of time, fate, and family. Chapter 5. A marriage made secret. Verona was veiled in sorrow, but within Juliet's chamber sorrow had not yet fully taken hold. Only silence, that aching quiet before grief understands its shape. Romeo was gone. The warmth of his arms still lingered on her skin, but already the day had taken him far from her reach. Outside, the doves called with careless joy. Inside, she stood with fingers pressed to the shutters, her eyes tracing the line of the horizon as if it might yield him back. Their parting had been soft but unbearable. "Wilt thou be gone?" "It is not yet near day," she had whispered. There, limbs tangled like vines, but the sky, pale with morning, had urged him on. "More light and light it grows, more dark and dark," Romeo had said, and though his steps were reluctant, he had gone. Juliet, left behind, felt the swell of the world closing in. Below stairs, the Capulet household was astir with news. The death of Tybalt had brought confusion, anger, and swift commands. Lady Capulet, wounded in pride and grief, believed Romeo a villain. Lord Capulet, sensing the storm in his daughter's silence, had made a decision. He would hasten Juliet's marriage to Paris, believing that a good match and a grand wedding might drive away her mourning. She shall be married to this noble earl. Wednesday is too soon Thursday, be it then, he said with finality. Juliet's heart sank. She had never known the weight of obedience until now. Once she had been a daughter, dutiful and bright. Now she was a wife, her soul already claimed by another hand, yet no one knew. Her nurse entered, flustered and bustling, speaking of gowns and garlands. "Marry, my child, you'll be a happy bride." But when Juliet turned her face away, stricken, the nurse frowned. "What's this? You weep still for Tybalt." "Tybalt is gone," Juliet murmured, "but Romeo banished, that word banished, hath slain 10,000 Tybalts." She sought counsel, but none came. Even the nurse, once so fond of Romeo, now urged her toward Paris. "Romeo's but a dish-clout to him," she said. "Best you marry the county." Juliet pulled back. "The betrayal bitter, speakest thou from thy heart?" she asked. The nurse, puzzled, affirmed it. "Well, thou hast comforted me marvellous much," Juliet replied with an edge of quiet steel. But within she was adrift, alone in a world that would not bend to love. That night, cloaked and desperate, Juliet fled to Friar Lawrence's cell. The old man was startled to see her, his garden fragrant with rosemary and rue. She fell to her knees. "Give me some counsel," she begged. "Be not so long to speak. I long to die, if what thou speaks. Speak not of remedy." The friar, moved by her anguish, thought deeply, and then, with solemn breath, he laid out a plainer, bold, uncertain course. He would give her a potion, a draught so cold and still it would mimic death. For 2 nights and a day she would lie as if lifeless, and when the bridegroom comes to wake thee, he shall find thee dead. Juliet trembled, not with fear, but with resolve. Give me," she said. "Love give me strength, and strength shall help afford." She left with the vial wrapped in linen, her fingers closed around it like a promise. The night air stirred her hair as she returned to her father's house, silent as a wraith. At home the bustle had reached fever pitch. Cooks shouted in the kitchen, and musicians rehearsed with haste. Lord Capulet, cheered by the energy, was pleased. "My heart is wondrous light," he said. "She be ruled, I warrant you." In her room, Juliet faced the vial. Her hands shook. The candle flickered. What if the potion failed? What if it killed her outright? Or worse, what if she woke alone in the tomb? Her thoughts tumbled like leaves in a storm. But Romeo's face rose before her mind's eye, calm and steady. She kissed the bottle's rim. "Romeo, Romeo, Romeo, here's drink I drink to thee." She drained it and fell as if struck by sleep. At dawn the nurse came with calls of joy. "Mistress." "What, mistress?" "Juliet." But the girl did not stir. The cup lay empty. Her breath did not rise. Screams rang through the halls. Lady Capulet ran to her daughter's bed, her cries sharp with fear. Lord Capulet followed, struck dumb by the stillness in her cheeks. Death lies on her like an untimely frost upon the sweetest flower of all the field, he whispered, his voice breaking. The wedding feast turned funeral. The musicians were dismissed. The garlands turned to shrouds. Paris arrived with hopes of joy and found only mourning. In the friar's cell, the plan moved to its next phase. A letter was dispatched to Romeo in Mantua, detailing the scheme and its hope. The friar's assistant, Friar John, carried it with urgency. But fate, ever cruel, intervened. An outbreak of plague had closed the city gates. Friar John was detained. The letter never reached Romeo. Instead, another man arrived, Balthasar, Romeo's servant, breathless and grave. "Her body sleeps in Capol's monument," he said. "I saw her laid low in her kindred's vault." Romeo reeled. The words fell like stones upon his chest. He thanked the messenger, then turned his face toward the darkness. He would go to Juliet. He would not be parted, not now, not even by death. In secret he sought a poor apothecary, a man in rags whose shop bore the dust of sorrow. "Let me have a dram of poison," Romeo said, "such soon-speeding gear as will disperse itself through all the veins." The man hesitated. "My poverty consents, but not my will." Romeo pressed gold into his hand. "I pay thy poverty, not thy will." That night, with death nestled in his pocket and grief like iron in his limbs, Romeo left for Verona. The stars burned overhead, silent and cold. Chapter 6. The Tomb and the Stars. The road to Verona was long and moonlit. A ribbon of silence, broken only by the steady sound of Romeo's horse. Dust curled in the night air, soft as breath. Romeo rode without pause, his heart hollow and fixed. On one point, the Capulet tomb. There, he believed, Juliet lay in death's embrace. He carried no hope, only resolve, only love, only poison. As the gates of Verona neared, Romeo pulled his cloak tighter. The city was quiet, though lanterns still flickered in some windows like fading stars. He passed unseen, a shadow moving through a world that had already let him go. Meanwhile, in the tomb beneath the earth, Juliet slept in stillness. The potion's grip held fast. Her lips were pale, her limbs cold, but within her the slow tide of life stirred gently, readying its return. Paris, too, had come to mourn. He arrived at the crypt before dawn, his footsteps solemn, his arms full of flowers. "Sweet flower, with flowers thy bridal bed I strew," he whispered. He had come not for show, but for grief. He knelt, a lonely figure, by the marble vault. Then came the sound of footsteps, boots on stones, fast and purposeful. Romeo appeared in the lamplight, his face drawn and fierce. Paris, startled, stepped forward. "This is that banished, haughty Montague that murdered my love's cousin," he said. "Obey and go with me." Romeo's eyes were wild. "Tempt not a desperate man," he warned. But Paris would not yield. Blades flashed in the dimness. In moments Paris fell mortally. Wounded. Romeo caught him as he dropped. Blood soaked the tomb floor, dark as wine. "Lay me with Juliet." Paris gasped. Romeo, moved by pity, lifted him gently into the tomb. Beside the girl they both loved. Then Romeo turned. There she lay, Juliet. Her face was untouched by death. Her cheeks held a ghost of color. But Romeo, blinded by sorrow, saw only the stillness, only the silence. He dropped to his knees. "Here's to thy health, my love," he said quietly, and uncorked the poison. As the liquid touched his lips, he felt peace rise within him like a tide. Thus, with a kiss, he murmured, "I die." He fell beside her, breath fleeing like mist. Moments passed, then Juliet stirred. A breath, a flicker of lashes. Her hand twitched. Slowly she sat up, the stone cold at her back. She looked around. Dazed, "Where is my Romeo?" Her voice echoed in the crypt. Then she saw him still, collapsed at her side. And beyond him, Paris, pale in death. Horror rushed into her bones. She touched Romeo's face, still warm but lifeless. She found the vial in his hand and brought it to her lips, but it was dry. Not a drop remained. She looked around. The crypt was empty of comfort. Only steel remained. Romeo's dagger still sheathed at his side. "O happy dagger," she whispered, "this is thy sheath." With steady hands and a steady heart, she pressed it to her chest. The crypt fell silent once more. When morning broke, Friar Lawrence arrived, breathless and afraid. He had come to rouse Juliet and spirit her away, but what he found froze him in place. The dead, laid out like broken prayers. A noise behind him, guards approaching. He fled. The townspeople arrived soon after, drawn by the trail of blood and the shouts of the watch. The Montagues were summoned. The Capulets to Prince Aeschylus stood at the door of the tomb, grim as judgment. There, amid the stone and sorrow, all truths were revealed. The friar, racked with guilt, confessed the whole, the secret marriage, the plot, the potion. Montague and Capulet stared at one another, not in fury, but in something colder. Lord Montague spoke first. "My son, my only son," and Lord Capulet, his voice cracked with grief, said simply, "O brother Montague, give me thy hand." The feud had claimed its final price. Side by side, they stood over the bodies of their children. Later that day, the sun broke through the clouds above Verona. Bells tolled not for victory, but for peace. The names of Romeo and Juliet passed from mouth to mouth, not in anger, but as legend, as sorrow, as a love that had burned brighter than the hate that tried to swallow it, and the stars, high above the rooftops of Verona, burned quietly